10 steps to setting up shop and becoming a successful Silicon Valley entrepreneur. Silicon Valley is the home of venture capital and the preferred location for startups from all over the world. If you're thinking of setting up a startup venture in Silicon Valley or migrating your venture from overseas, this slideshow explains some of the most important factors to consider. Step 1. Do your homework. Becoming a successful entrepreneur isn't easy. Unfortunately, there are no get-rich-quick schemes. If there were, everyone would be signed up for the scheme and everyone would be rich. Being a successful entrepreneur means building a successful startup business, and building a successful business requires a wide range of skills. It's important to research your market and educate yourself on the whole startup process before you spend any serious time or money on your new startup venture. You'll have to know how to form a company, issue shares, appoint a board of directors, a management team, manage the company with little cash in many cases, form your own contracts, set up your finance and accounting system, avoid going to jail for violation of securities regulations, create a brand image, generate momentum in the marketplace, navigate your way through merger and acquisition negotiations, formulate a patent and intellectual property strategy, build an effective sales team, establish a customer relations management system, understand how to value your company and your assets, and you're going to have to understand how to raise finance from venture capital and other investors. It's no accident that online courses on all these topics are available from Silicon Valley Business School. Your chances of avoiding the pitfalls and achieving success will be dramatically improved if you do your homework. Be prepared to reinvent the company if you're moving from another country. The US market is different, mostly because it's much larger and more complex than markets in smaller countries. Where you have a couple of competitors in your home country, you might find that the same sector is occupied by thousands of competitors in the United States. You'll need to specialize if you're going to find a niche in the US. This often means re-evaluating your core competencies and finding gaps in the market that are not already occupied by capable competitors. Hire experienced business lawyers and accountants. The lawyer is a key part of the business team in Silicon Valley. Lawyers open doors, make introductions to investors, customers, and other key people that you need to know. Some lawyers provide co-working facilities, and they often reduce their rates for startup ventures in exchange for a small percentage of the company. One thing to consider is that the lawyer representing the startup is not representing the founders. The lawyer is representing the startup, and sometimes it makes sense for the founders to have their own lawyers representing their own personal interests. Form a company, Silicon Valley style. Companies in Silicon Valley are formed in a particular cookie-cutter style. If you want to have a company that's going to be eligible for financing by venture capital investors, then you're going to want to form a Delaware C Corporation with bylaws containing preferred stock, indemnity of officers, and various terms that are investor friendly and that the venture capital investors are familiar with. Generally, you will start the company with something like 10 million shares of common stock and 2 million, approximately 20%, allocated to an employee stock option plan. In the early days, it's a good idea to keep the board of directors small. When you get to the stage that you've raised venture capital and you're adding a venture capital, the venture capital investor will require at least one seat on the board, and typically the board has 3 investors at that stage. It's always a good idea to have an odd number of directors on the board to avoid a deadlocked voting situation. And when it comes to an early stage startup company, the venture investors will require 3 seats. One will be held by the venture investor, another one may be held by a founder, and the third one will be held by the CEO. So if you put too many people on the board of directors early on, you'll only have to remove them when it comes to raising finance and organizing the board in the cookie cutter style that's familiar to venture capital investors. Join networking organizations. There are plenty of networking organizations in Silicon Valley. They're a great place to meet up and make connections. It's not true that you can just go to one of these events and meet an investor and immediately raise finance for your startup company. Generally, it takes a lot more work and a lot more networking than that. But there are many events, and there are various special interest groups. There's a website at andreas.com that has a list of networking organizations in Silicon Valley, and this can be a very useful method of connecting with the local community in Silicon Valley. Formulate a realistic intellectual property strategy. If you're in an area like smartphones, for example, where the products are packed with patents, there are over 250,000 patented inventions in a smartphone. If you're in a patent-packed product field like this, the best advice is save your money and don't waste any time and money filing patents. As a startup company, you don't have the wherewithal to litigate the patents. It's going to cost millions of dollars to assert the patents against infringers. And as a startup company, you wouldn't have that anyway. So generally, patents are a questionable investment for Silicon Valley style startup companies, especially in fields like software, where due to a recent case, Alice versus CLS in the United States Federal Court, Supreme Court, many software patents are being invalidated. So formulating a realistic IP strategy is important. If you're in an area, say medical area or some other field, where the product is not packed with patents, there aren't hundreds of thousands of patented inventions in a product, then if you are going to file patents, then the advice is to build litigation quality patents. You want to hire the best attorneys you can find. You can measure them by looking at their track record of building patents that have been used successfully in litigation, and have the patent attorneys design the patents to survive the challenges that the patents will face when they come to being asserted, such as the new inter-party review process, which is a new process by the US Patent and Trademark Office that is currently invalidating something like 75% of the patents that have previously been issued but then have been challenged in this IPR process. Also, you want the patent attorneys to build the patents in order to come out of a Markman hearing with a favourable determination. The Markman hearing is where the judge before a case determines how the claims are going to be interpreted in the case. If you're going to build patents, build litigation quality patents. Assemble an impressive advisory board. The advisory board provides credibility. This is something that new startups lack. And if you can fill your advisory board with credible people, individuals that have a track record and respect in the business community, this will be very valuable to the credibility of your startup company. Your advisory board members can provide introductions. They can provide introductions to investors, to employees, to potential customers, board members, all sorts of valuable introductions. The advisory board can be compensated by stock options. It's not necessary in an early stage startup company to pay the advisors in cash. Don't ask too much of the advisor's time. It's much easier to have an advisor join your advisory board if you're not asking them to spend too much time. Generally, they're busy people. Once you do have them on your advisory board, put them on your website, identify them as part of the team. Unlike a board of directors, which is a highly responsible position, sitting on a board of advisors has really no responsibilities. So there's really not much downside in the company appointing a board of advisors and in a person joining that board of advisors. Plug into a connected co-working facility. Startup companies grow very quickly, they expand very quickly, and sometimes they contract very quickly. Flexibility is key when it comes to office space for a startup venture. Startups are not really good candidates for these long-term leases where the company is locked into a fixed space for a period of time that extends into a number of years. Flexibility is key. You also need a high-speed internet if you're in the online business, and virtually any startup business requires high-speed internet access these days. You need access to expert advisors, investors, and like-minded entrepreneurs. These can all be gained by plugging in to a connected co-working facility. And fortunately, now there are many co-working facilities in Silicon Valley where you can take a space, you can set up office there and mix and mingle with other entrepreneurs and meet the local community. Generate momentum. Momentum is a magical force. Startups that generate momentum often generate critical mass and win the race to IPO and market leadership. Momentum is evidenced by the consistent achievement of milestones, an upbeat team, and a positive buzz and brand image around the company. Marketing, especially social media marketing in a startup venture, is aimed at really generating momentum. Spreading good news about the company in an upbeat, enthusiastic style can whip up support and generate a positive image. Finally, the startup process usually takes longer than expected. Sometimes the timescales extend way beyond what was considered possible. Planning, patience, and perseverance are keys to success. Don't expect immediate results, as you're likely to be disappointed. Controlling your expenses is important to buy you as much time as possible. The more you spend, the more quickly you reach the end of your financial runway. Bootstrapping and keeping a tight control of costs can provide you with the time you need to generate results and get your startup established.